Well, welcome again to the Table Talks podcast. My name is Tim, and today I'm joined with Pastor Sarah. And over these few weeks together, we have been going through the messages from our At the Movies series. During At the Movies, we're unpacking some of our favorite films and their stories and how they intersect with God's story and His design and our lives ultimately. And so every week's been an in-depth conversation into the messages from our weekends. And we'll get to talk a little bit further about our movies and our stories and the messages. So Sarah taught week 2, and the movie is Inside Out 2, which was probably my kid's favorite movie of the past year. So I'm curious, before we get into kind of the subject of your message for it, maybe for people who haven't seen it yet, give us like an overview of what that story is like.
Okay, so Inside Out 2 is a continuation of Inside Out 1.
Right.
But Inside Out 2 is a continuation of the story of a young girl named Riley, and she is getting ready to go through puberty. And most of the story takes place inside of her brain, psyche, something like that. And then her different emotions are characterized and personified.
Yeah.
It's so funny and so relevant and so interesting for I think any human. So she has normal puberty and young adolescent problems, like with friends, and she's trying to get on a hockey team and all the stress that comes with that. And the inside of her psyche is shown through these characters, all of their responses to her external life. So it's really interesting. And I find it very moving every time I watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why did you pick that movie in the first place? Because I know you had a say in it. I mean, we were looking at a collection of movies, but that was something you volunteered right away and said you wanted to do.
Yes. It was not an assignment. It was a request. I loved the movie when I saw it. It made me very emotional. Again, I think just as a person who I'm very introspective by nature. And so I felt like, we all should be seen like this, that we have these internal mechanisms that are happening. And then as a parent, I think I felt very moved in this. I have 2 kids in middle school, so feeling like I can reflect back on that time in my own life, but also reflect forward and how much I love my kids. And when I saw it, it made me laugh because it feels very real to my lived experience right now, raising these kids. But it also is very moving to me.
True, because your kids are pretty much, or I mean, your 2 boys are at least right there in that stage.
Yes.
Those things are happening.
Those things are happening. Like there's a scene where this big wrecking ball comes through and they're like, puberty's here. And I mean, as a person who's gone through that, I remember, feeling so out of sorts, and I don't want to speak on behalf of my kids being out of sorts, but you just watch, there's so much internally happening as you grow. And you grow exponentially in that season. And so, I just felt very tender toward it while watching it.
Did you find your boys being introspective after watching it?
A little bit.
So what did
I don't know if they laughed as much as I laughed. I think it was mostly me.
Yeah.
And then my husband, when he watched it with me, he got emotional too.
Yeah.
And we do have a younger daughter, and the person in the film is a girl. And so I think it also made us both emotional about her and all the things that could be.
And I know the people that worked on that film did a ton of research work around psyche and psychology and all those things. So there was a lot of real depth to the content and the way they told the story as well. What was there something in the studying of the story on the film specifically that you learned from it? Was there something that stood out that you felt like, oh wow, that was new for me?
I don't know if it was new. Some of it, I don't know if this is what we're talking about as much, but has to do with that season of life and me, I think, raising humans in that season of life.
Yeah.
There is this scene in the beginning where, and it's a continuation from the first film. She has, I think, what they call islands of things that really matter to her.
Yeah.
And you see them change with different seasons. And what was showing in this film was actually pretty consistent with my research as raising kids in this season. The friendships become really, really big in your world around young adolescents.
Yeah.
And then family relationships start to shift. And I think it was very meaningful for me to see it, the parenting research I've been doing reflected
Yeah.
in the research that they had been doing. And then, man, I think even there's a part of the movie where Riley's internal world is shown, and then her friends too, where they're noticing each other's expressions. And that I almost wish I had more time to dig into. That's something that's always been fascinating to me, how body language and facial expression actually communicate a whole lot. And so there's something in that I wish I would have even had more time to
Yeah.
study.
That's cool. Um, uh, how did you make the connection from that story to now the spiritual sense of things? Like, how did you make that journey to get to that now? Like, from our psyche and understanding and our emotions to now, how does that connect with, is it God's design or God's heart and those things?
Well, I feel like I had it really easy.
Yeah.
I do. And maybe it's because it's something that matters to me or
Yeah.
something I've processed a lot. I mean, I've been to therapy. I've worked on a lot of things my own self. I am better now. No, I would go to therapy again. Um, but I think for me it was so clear from
Yeah.
the first moment I watched it. In this film in particular, they talked so much about how her Riley's experiences
Yeah.
influenced her thoughts and beliefs, and then those beliefs created a sense of self, and that very much seems congruent with God's design of us and what psychology and biology is finding
Yeah.
in our designs, which I think is very intentional by God. And then when aligning it spiritually and honestly just with my lived experience of some of the therapy that I went through in a setting along with scripture, rewiring some of the ways that I was thinking, using what was true and looking at how my thought patterns and my beliefs impacted my whole life experience in a really very true way. I could see that in the film. And so part of my experience in my relationship with God, that's very much part of my life. And then what I see in the Bible about our thoughts and how much they impact
Yeah.
our lives and our belief systems. I mean, so I did not feel like I had to do too much to make that
Yeah. Yeah.
connection because it felt so natural
Yeah.
watching the film.
Yeah. A lot of the stories around how beliefs are formed, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what those strings, right, that form in the
Yeah.
film. And how much your emotions connected to your experiences together create these.
Yeah.
And I've been reflecting on like what is on the process and the spirituality of it all. Like how much of it, because we talk sometimes about how I'm trying to see how to want to phrase this around like the sovereignty of God in these things,
Oh,
right? There's a spiritual aspect of God at work in us that shapes who we become. And yet there's just as much, obviously, these other components that are very real. Not like the spiritual parts are not. I'm saying like that are maybe more tangible because they're lived experiences and they're the internal feelings that we feel deeply as well. Have you processed that a little bit on that aspect of it? Like where does it that is God working through these things entirely? Does he work apart from it?
those are great questions. I should say that I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Okay. As I answer and meander through this, I I do think what is fascinating, even in my preparation for talking about this, even for me, in having done all of this work internally, it can be easy for me to over spiritualize, like just
Yeah.
pray about it and God will fix the way you feel. And I do think there is an element of the power of God that can bring peace in situations
Yeah, yeah.
that are really difficult. And I don't think it's a but, I think it's an and that in his design, we can see that we are equipped with things that we can do, like the things we can focus on and choose to believe and choose to respond to the beliefs that we have that I think are, I don't like to think of them as separate, but I think we do separate them naturally. Like this is spiritual and this is practical. I think they impact each other. So I don't have a full answer for that, but I do think it can be dangerous to lean on one or the other too much. Dangerous to think, okay, I have no part in this and the mechanics of it don't matter. Because reality shows us that's not true.
Yeah.
And even scripture shows us that's not true. It's not all just this like surrender. We're given lots of handles in the Bible to help rewire our own beliefs and thoughts and to choose where our brains will go. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering, but I did think about that a lot. And man, maybe everyone feels this way with the talks that they did, but this could go on and on. There's so much about this subject that could be really continually unpacked, like what you're talking about.
I mean, you could do a whole talk on just one of the emotions, right?
Yeah.
And this one was really centered around I mean, not centered, but a big part of it was anxiety coming into the picture, right? I thought one of the ways it was similar to the first movie was around how sadness and it kind of took over and how it was trying to figure out the right mix of joy and sadness together and how life is both of those things. And then the whole journey of anxiety in this one was you don't want anxiety to have like full control over it, but there was some good from anxiety that exists in it. Um, I'm curious about your thoughts on this as well, like on the anxiety piece. I've been reading more and more on anxiety as well, uh, and around the the belief aspect of anxiety, like what happens when we let anxiety shape our beliefs?
Hmm. Well, I think I would say this about a lot of emotions, that if we let them sit in the driver's seat, and they do shape our beliefs, we have to be thoughtful and wise
Yeah,
about that and aware, really of emotion in general sitting in the driver's seat, especially if there's one. Um, Anxiety, I think, being like we saw in the film, being in full control at the control panel.
yeah,
Uh, I mean, any of us who ever experienced what that does inside your beliefs and your body, I think what it can do is really crowd out what else could be true because anxiety can get so loud and anxiety feeds on itself,
yeah, yeah,
and can start to become, I mean, in me, it had in times past felt like a monster that just feeds on more. So the more anxiety just can grow and grow and grow and become
yeah,
like panic, in your
yeah,
body and in your brain. And so in our beliefs, I think allowing it to be in the driver's seat or at the control panel without being aware of it or watchful of it can really shape our beliefs about who we are and about the world around us because it becomes the lens through which we see.
yeah.
And I think it's dangerous.
Yeah, I think you get a skewed version of reality. I
Yeah.
think when you look at things through anxiety, I think about it in like relationships with people, that somebody walks in the room, and like gives you a weird look and they walk away and then anxiety starts playing and you tell yourself a story about what they're thinking about you
Yep.
when they're just like, I gotta go use the restroom. I hope nobody notices, right?
Yeah.
Uh, And we create a version of reality that is not real because certain emotions dictate it in
Mhm.
us. Yeah.
Even if it is, I mean, and this is probably as a person who has dealt with anxiety before and sometimes has to watch that. I have to even go through almost the other side of that too and tell myself, even if they were looking at me weird and even if they are frustrated with me,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I can't let that
Right.
be in charge
Yeah.
because my mind can make up a bunch of
Yeah.
different scenarios. And then if you're ever faced, I think anxiety can also come if you ever are faced with a real life difficulty. And then you think, oh, well, now that I know it's possible, it could
Mhm.
happen anytime.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
now one person was mad at me because I said something. Is that going to happen I just have to be mindful not to let that be in charge.
So, I mean, that goes back to some of your main points in your message. You had these 3 points where you said, like, part of like combating these things, you said, listen to what's true, right? So you're trying to make sure your input is correct. You're listening to the things that are right and true. And for us, we say, obviously, things that Jesus says in his word. You said the second thing you said was turn down the noise, which removing distractions of things that aren't true. And the third thing is choose your thoughts. Now, the first two I could see as pretty like straightforward application. I know what the steps would be to listen to what's true, at least on my end. It feels easy to discern. Turning down the noise, I know what things are distracting and what things are speaking to me in a way that I know are not healthy for me. But choosing your thoughts, that seems a little bit more challenging.
It is.
I don't even know how. Like, what? How do I choose my thoughts?
It is challenging. I mean, the movie shows it beautifully, and I think even it shows something that can feel abstract in a beautiful way, and sometimes we really need that. That's why film and art can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Where in this scene where Riley, there's this like sparkle that's going toward Joy. I don't know if you remember this moment because I got very emotional watching it. They were saying, Joy, she wants you. So I think being mindful of like choosing our thoughts for me looks a lot like knowing increased self-awareness.
Yeah.
I think knowing where my thoughts are going and predetermining. I think in those first two steps, what I want to listen to and then what I will think about. And knowing for me when I'm going into the danger zones of anxiety being in the control seat. And I I think I think maybe I wrote this into the message. If I didn't, it was maybe something I took out about literally saying out loud what I will choose to think about.
Yeah.
Because I know my own patterns and I've learned and am still learning my own patterns and saying, okay, if, you know, in the past I've struggled with like body image. If I know going into this conversation that's going to bother me, I will say, okay, I'm going to choose to think this. I am going to center my mind on this and center my mind on the fact that I will not compare myself. I will trust God. I will think on like when I have this trigger, I will go here with my brain and repeat this truth to myself. And that comes from filling myself with the truths I want to have and turning down the noise on the other things and then taking regular inventory of the thought patterns I have. I might be unique in some ways, or maybe everyone's like this. I don't know. I've only have my experience, but there are times when I have things that show up like stress in my body.
Yeah.
That I go back and go, okay, what was I thinking? What was I getting into a cycle of unhealthy thoughts that I need to next time catch myself?
There is something that is really interesting, like this idea of speaking out loud, those things that I've heard multiple times in a few other ways, like naming your emotions, right, when you're feeling them. Or I've heard for a lot of people that have like this inner critic within them. I know for those who study the Enneagram ones, right, usually have a voice, somebody that's like always nagging, essentially.
Yeah.
Their own voice that's always on the inside that's nagging. To even give him a name is helpful, and to say, "Hey, Billy, stay away." That's our husband's name. But then even on a spiritual sense, I was talking, or I will be talking next week's podcast, Organic Plug, with Pastors Felipe and Mandy around the spiritual nature of things. Uh, and we're talking about the power of like renouncing certain things. And we talk about dark spiritual things to renounce and how the physical act of saying it does something internally as well. And it is both on the emotional side of things and also on the spiritual side of things. On the spiritual side of things, even on relationship with God, where we talk about how you confess with your mouth, believe in your heart, and you confess with your mouth. That's how you find salvation. So there is something about our words of us speaking them that does something
Yeah.
internally for us.
I think you're right. And I think, while you were talking, I was remembering one of the scriptures that we had in the message was about thinking on these things. And I think that is very similar to the speaking out. Like it's a conscious choice. I will say this
Yeah.
instead of that. And I like that verse, like think on things that are good and true and lovely. Because sometimes it's hard to stop thoughts. And that's why I like the proactive to choose my thoughts. Okay, when I think this, I'm going to choose to think this instead.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't stop that, but instead I'm going to pick a truth
Yeah.
that is better than that thought, and I'm going to meditate on that.
Yeah.
And for me, speaking it out loud, I don't know if it does rewire something. I'm sure it does if I were to do much more research. But speaking things out loud, it's like it's hard for me to think the other thing while I'm speaking the thing I want to think out loud.
Yeah.
It's hard for them to both exist. So saying it out loud to myself or to somebody else is really helpful.
Yeah. Another principle similar to this, I heard a TD Jakes message where he talked about how you cannot both worry and worship at the same time.
Yeah.
And there is an aspect to it, like when you focus your attention and you engage your body, your voice, and your will in it, it does change the order of things in your life, at least in that moment.
And it does in that moment. I mean, to come back to this practical stuff, it does change what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And it is, what I think is important to say is it is a practice and it is something to choose to do. It's not this, okay, now that I've thought, I want to think good thoughts, now I will forever. Like I'm very aware that I actually have to do the work that it takes.
Right.
But that I don't want to stay in a place where worry can keep growing.
Yeah.
And so say, no, I will turn on, and for me, it's turning on a song and singing along with it. There have been times it's almost like I'm fighting for my brain and my heart to be in a better place.
Yeah.
So it's not this like super lovely, easy thing. It's a lot of work for me.
Yeah. It's good. Well, there's a question I've been asking to everybody at the end of our time, which is I know everybody's worked real hard in preparation for their message. And you had really a handful of minutes to be able to pack in to do a 35 with the movie clips and everything. And I'm sure at the bottom of the page of what you had a whole lot more content you wish you had a chance to go through. Was there one or two things that like, oh man, if I had time, I would have shared these in the message?
One was something that Jesus talked about. I mentioned it a little bit, but I wanted to go into the whole talk. It's in Matthew 6 when he talks about not worrying about what you wear, but then to trust God because God cares for you. And so that is something I wanted to add in. We just didn't have the time, but that for me, that's been so powerful.
Yeah.
When I think on the things of God, I am reminded I don't have to worry about as much because God cares for me and he's got it in hand. And that does lessen my anxiety. And then the other part that, of course, is probably evident, I wish we could have gone into so much more of the psychology behind our thoughts and our beliefs and the way that it impacts our spiritual walk.
Yeah.
But that could be many hours.
We'll do a series
Someday.
on anxiety. All right. Sarah, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us and for
Thank you.
preparing the message. I hope for everybody else you were encouraged by our time together. And I just want to remind you that over the whole course of this series, the messages are only available if you join us live at one of our locations at North San Jose, Sunnyvale, or Fremont, or on our Church Online platform at Echo.Online.Church. Our services there are only in the morning. We do rebroadcasts every day in the afternoon and evenings. You can catch those there as well, but they're not available to you on demand. We'll be continuing our conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe here on our YouTube channel to find out more on what's coming up in the future. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one.